שלום לכם. בשיעור היום אנחנו שואלים את עצמנו איך להגיע לקהלים מגוונים. אנשים שלא חושבים על עצמם כצרכני ידע מדעי, מחשיבים יותר מקורות סמכות אחרים, ואולי אפילו עוינים או חשדניים כלפי הממסד המדעי. מי שיעזור לנו להגדיר ולהבין את הרעיון של Inclusive Science Communication, תקשורת המדע שהיא מוכוונת ומכילה לקהלים מגוונים, הוא פרופסור ברוס לוינסטיין מאוניברסיטת קורנל, שהתארח אצלנו בתחילת הקורס. וכדי שנוכל לשוחח, אעבור עכשיו לאנגלית. Today we will discuss Inclusive Science Communication with Professor Bruce Levenstein, a member of the Department of Communication and Chair of the Department of Science and Technology Studies at Cornell University. After teaching and studying science communication in all continents but Antarctica, he is very well positioned to discuss the great diversity of people and context that science communication need to address. Shalom Bruce, thank you for joining us.
Shalom Ayelet.
Well, let's start with the basics. Science gave so much to humanity, doubled our lifespan, gave us food and an amazing understanding of how our bodies, the world, and the universe work, made our life easier with technology. How come there are people who are suspicious about scientific knowledge and prioritize other types of knowledge as a way of understanding the world?
Because although science has given us all those wonderful things, it's not the only force in our lives. Families are part of our lives, religion is part of our lives, the places where we live, the geography of the places that we live are part of our lives. And people bring all of that into their own understanding of who they are. And so they bring those other knowledges, the stories they've heard from their grandparents and the opportunities they have in the places that they live, and the experiences of other people who are like them. And those things are only so that the science information is only part of what they bring to their decisions.
Well, in Israel, there are big minorities of people who reject evolution, for example, on the basis of religious ideology. Should we hide human evolution exhibitions in a natural science museum or a science museum to make these sites kosher for visits? How do you balance being inclusive and respectful to someone else's values when they are in conflict with your own values?
So it's a real challenge. There's no question that bringing competing values together is a challenge. It begins with respect for the other values. Begins with not denigrating other people, because once you've done that, you've lost them. They're gone. People will always choose their own values over your values. There are lots of reasons for that. It has to do with belonging to communities. It's part of what we do as humans, and we want to belong to the people who we know and trust us and so on. So what that means is you have to begin with the discussion about what is it about their beliefs that makes it difficult for them to believe, let's say, in evolution, or to trust certain kinds of institutions. And listen to them, and really listen to them, to try to understand what it is that's their concerns are. You have to have good faith on their side. They are going to listen to you as well, because you have to engage in an honest dialogue about what are the values, why are you making decisions that you're making, why, for a scientist, there's a famous quote from Theodore Jansky, something like, nothing in biology makes sense without evolution, explaining how it's difficult. And sometimes it's about finding ways in which you can agree to go forward even with different values. If I can tell a story, one time I was working on a project where we had children out looking for basically evolutionary information, where they were looking at pigeons, and they were looking at different colors of pigeons, and the scientific reason had to do with trying to understand how these different pigeons breed. Now, many of these children came from fundamentalist religious communities where they were using this project as part of their homeschooling science project. And I said to some of the teachers and the parents, I said, I don't understand. Your beliefs don't agree with the whole evolutionary purpose of this whole project. And what they said was, yes, we understand that, but observing nature is one of the best ways that we can show God's grace, that we can give thanks to God for this incredible world that God has given us. And so while we know that you are interested in these observations for other reasons, we are interested in them because of the beauty of the world, and we can work together with those shared values.
But sometimes it's really hard to share the values. I'm thinking about, for example, communities that don't allow women to speak in front of men, okay? So if I want to speak with them about science, for whatever reason, I need to send a man there. So I need to forget my values about women rights and about equality in order to speak with them. Should I try to speak with them?
Yes, because if you don't try to speak with them, then you're completely lost. It does mean having to make compromises, and does mean having to listen. It also means thinking creatively about other ways of getting information across, so that maybe it's not about scientists going to talk with communities. Maybe it's about building opportunities for women to gather and to talk about women's health issues without men present. And maybe that means it's not the scientist who goes and talks with those women. Maybe it's someone you've trained who's worked with you who will do that. So it's partly about recognizing the values of the community you're working with and finding a way to work around those, work with those. I won't say work around, that's the wrong word. Work with those values, but be creative about how you do that.
Okay, so how would you define inclusive science communication? I know it's a big question. So maybe what should we do or not do in order to be inclusive?
So inclusive science communication is about recognizing both that there are many different contexts in which people have communicated and are interested in communicating, and that they bring different values. It's also about recognizing some of the limitations of our own approach to science communication, including some of the limitations of science itself. So, for example, the fact that science is often presented stereotypically as a male profession. And that means that we have to be much more proactive about presenting women scientists so that women and young girls can see other people who look like them. Also, with racial and ethnic diversity, we need to be showing people. We also need to be showing that we value their perspectives. So I have here in the United States, as you know, there's a significant proportion of our population that speaks Spanish. And yet we still produce most of our science communication in English. And sometimes we translate it into Spanish, but it's still clearly coming from the US English perspective. And I have a postdoc who's been here at Cornell, who's worked very strongly to say, we have to produce original science communication in Spanish, answering the questions that people in Spanish-speaking communities have, which might not be the same questions that the people in the English-speaking community have, because those communities often have different economic situations, different legal situations here in the United States. They may be, if they're in other countries, they may have structural differences in who has power. And we need to produce the science communication from that perspective in order to be able to connect with those communities. So inclusive science communication is about recognizing the incredible diversity of situations in which science communication happens and the people who are involved, and then the ways that therefore we have to change the way we do science communication in order to achieve a more inclusive world of people who understand something about science.
Professor Boris Lewinstein, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.